Hi. Okay, so now that we have our language sample all coded, I'm going to show you how to run the analysis on it. Okay, so this is our practice transcript from our kid at the 10th percentile. And to run the analyses, the first thing I need to do is select a database to compare the child with. So SALT has a large sample or a large database of language samples from typically developing children that you can use to compare your child's sample with. So you want to click on Database and select Database Samples and Settings. All right, and then since I put the header in already, we've already selected right here, the context is conversational. So it's actually already selected the database right here. It's just going to pop up. And then we want to go down here and click on Find Matched Samples. And then we want to click to select the same number of analysis set utterances. And then we're going to click on Find Equated Samples. Okay. And then it's going to show down here that it found 22 samples to compare with. And then we have our standard deviation is set at 1 standard deviation by default. That's where we want it. And I'm going to click OK. All right, so now the database has been selected and I can run reports that compare it to the database. So I'm going to run the standard measures report first. And that's going to take just a minute to come up. Okay, so here's our standard measures report. And you can see here the scores for our child's language sample are right here under score. And then we've got the standard deviation, plus or minus, where they are from the mean. And that mean it's comparing to is the database mean of those 22 samples that we're comparing with in the SALT database. So that's the mean database score, minimum, maximum, and what the standard deviation is. So we're going to look right here at these scores for our child. And this first section is for transcript length. And since we're using the free trial software, we could only do 15 utterances. So you can see that our child had a lot fewer utterances than the database mean, but that's because we artificially cut it off at 15. So you can just ignore this first part right here and skip down to here where they've now cut the samples in the database at 15 utterances as well. So this part starting here is actually a fair comparison. Okay, so right here we can find the MLU in words and the MLU in morphemes. So this child had an MLU in morphemes of 2.87, and the database mean for children their age was an MLU of 4.27. So you can see that our child is 1.4 standard deviations below the mean. And this column for standard deviations would be the same as z-scores. So we could say for MLU and morphemes, this child has a z-score of negative 1.4. Okay, some of the other measures we're interested in is that SI composite score. So that's a measure of how many clauses per utterance on average. And our child's score was 0.85. And the database mean was 1.07. So they're 2.2 standard deviations below the mean for that. And we can also look at total number of words, number of different words, type token ratio, and a moving type token ratio. And it looks like the moving type token ratio, we must not have enough utterances. So that's not going to work. So we'll just go off the type token ratio for this. So that's just the number of types of words they had divided by the tokens, or the total number of words. And our child had a 0.73, which is 0.84 standard deviations above the database mean. So they were within the typical range for type token ratio. However, for the number of different words, they were actually 1.1 standard deviations below the mean. So just barely below the normal range for that measure. Okay, and then next it has the discourse measures, which you're also going to want to ignore because in this sample we only put the child utterances, right? So these things like response to questions and turns aren't going to be accurate. So you can just skip over that. If you go down here, also we didn't put in any pauses or stuff, so you can ignore that information. We did indicate maze words, so this will tell you what percentage of the words were maze words or repetitions or revisions or filler words. And our child had 7.5%. which is negative 0.42 standard deviations below the mean. So that's within the normal range. Remember that anything from negative 0.99 to positive 0.99 is considered the average range. And then we can look at our percent utterances with errors. And our child had 53.3%. So that's a really high percentage of utterances with errors. You can see that the database mean was 14.24%. So our child was 3.3 standard deviations above the mean for number of errors. So that's well out of the typical range that we would expect for this child's age. And then we have our number of omissions. They had 9 omissions. And the database mean is 0.8 omissions. So again, a really high Z-score on this, 7.46. And then for the number of errors, they had 2 errors, and the database mean was 1.5 errors. So for that, their score is 0.24 standard deviations above the mean, which would be considered within the average range. Okay, so the next report I want to show you how to run. You'll go to the Analyze menu up here, and we are going to run the word and morpheme summary. Okay, so this report will give you some of the information that we already got on the standard measures report, like MLU. But what this gives us that the other one doesn't is it will calculate the Brown stage for you based on MLU. So this child is in Brown stage 3. And that's the expected stage for kids aged 24 to 41 months. And our child was 48 months, so that's lower than what we would have expected for her age. And then this is also going to break out the utterance length in words and morphemes, so you can look down here and see how many they had of each length and check and see that it looks like their longest utterance was 4 words and their longest utterance was 4 morphemes. Okay, and the next report that we're going to run is also in the Analyze menu, and it is the Omissions and Error Codes report. We'll do that for the child, total utterances. Okay, and this is a nice report. It just gives you a summary of all the omissions and errors that they made. So they have omitted words right here, and then omitted bound morphemes, and it gives you the utterance that it was in, so you can see the context. And then down here it has your error codes, word errors and utterance level errors. And then the last report I'm going to show you is also in the Analyze menu, and it is the bound morpheme tables. Okay. And this will give you a percent accuracy for the different bound morphemes. So we have number occurred or number of obligatory contexts here, and then number of omissions, and it gives you a percent accuracy. Okay, so those are all the reports that we're going to be running. There's one more thing I need to show you. So for this assignment, we're actually going to be comparing 2 different transcripts to each other. And so an easy way to make comparisons like that in SALT is to link the 2 transcripts together. So to link 2 transcripts, you need to have them both open. So I've got my practice 10th percentile kid open right here. And then I'm going to open the 50% one real quick. And there it is. Okay, so now I've got both transcripts open so I can link them. So I want to go right up here to link transcripts. Okay, and you can select which one you want on which side. So I'm going to put the 10th one over here, and the default is time 1, time 2, because a lot of times you'll use this feature to compare someone in treatment over time. But we're comparing 2 different kids in this one. So I'm just going to put 10th right there and 50th right here. Okay, and then for the database, we'll still compare both of these kids to the database as well. I'm going to select same number of analysis set utterances instead of total words. And then I'm going to press link. Okay, so now they're linked together, and it's going to have me select the database for each one. Okay, so I'm selecting the database for the kid at the 10th percentile first. And I'm going to do find match samples, same number of analysis set utterances. and find the samples and click OK. And now it's going to bring up and have me do the same thing for the 50th percentile kid. And I'll select same number of utterances, find aqueous samples, and OK. All right, so now when I go to run my standard measures report, it's going to look a little bit different this time. Okay, so now what I've got in this report is my 10th percentile kid is over here on the left-hand column, and my 50th percentile kid is here on the right-hand column. And it's still comparing both of them to the database as well. It's not showing all those database scores now, but it does give the z-scores or standard deviation of how far they are from the database mean here. Okay, so again, we're going to ignore this first part and scroll down to MLU. So the MLU in morphemes, again, is the same for our 10th percentile kid that we looked at, 2.87. And then our kid over here that was at the 50th percentile had an MLU of 4.27, which is 0 standard deviations away from the mean. So that's right on the mean score for her age. And then, again, we can look at all the scores for our 10th percentile kid and our 50th percentile kid and make comparisons that way. Okay, so that concludes this video for looking at SALT analyses. And there are copies of these reports with some instructions in the module on the pages. So have fun running your analyses.